This is my high school creep story. So to begin, I'm female and average height. I did track and swimming, so I was below average weight. I was skinny and had not a lot of muscle, surprisingly, since I did sports. I was a freshman, and ninth grade was exciting. I had a few friends, but mostly focused on school. I was in advanced math and language arts classes. There was a boy named Josh who was in every one of my classes, except for my math class. I didn't talk or interact with him a lot. I got weird vibes from him, but I decided that I was being weird. My friends told me that Josh always asked about me, what I liked, who I liked, pretty much everything and anything. I thought it was a prank. After about a month of asking about me, he started talking to me. The first conversation was awkward. "You're random person, right?" He would ask my name, pretending he didn't know. I would nod and go back to organizing my locker. He kept talking to me. "Would you like to come with me and my friends after school?" "No, thanks." I didn't know him. "Why?" he asked. "I have lots of homework." I made an excuse. He asked this every day. His friends would come up to me and say that we would make a good couple. I would tell them I was not interested and ask them to leave me alone. They joked I was in denial. Jerks. That's apparently what they told Josh. He came up to my face again. "I heard you liked me. Funny rumors, right?" Yes, very funny, because it's just rumors. I would make sure he heard every word I was saying. "I also heard you were in denial. You shouldn't ignore your feelings," Josh grinned. I really wanted to punch him in the face. He's been bothering me for a long time. I decided to be nice. "Look, I'm concentrating on school and I want to go to a college in the state my college is in, so I'm not trying to date anyone. Your friends are confused, but I don't like you that way." He walked away and glared at me. The next day, he didn't show up to school. He didn't show up for the next week, claiming he was sick. When he came back, I guess he expected me to talk to him. He would follow me around, but I wouldn't say anything. We had most of the same classes. I went into my math class and Josh almost followed me inside. That's how I found out he was trying to stalk me. He talked to my friends more, saying we were dating. I would tell them he was lying, and thankfully my friends believed me. Someone stole my schedule, and then Josh knew exactly where I was. I would take frequent bathroom breaks in between classes just to stay away from him. He told my friends he was trying to use reverse psychology on me to make me like him, like not showing up to school to make me miss him, or being a jerk since, in his mind, girls like jerks. He always made jokes about me too. He would joke about my ethnicity or how I apparently had chicken legs. He said that Chinese people ate dogs and cats. I'm Chinese. I told him to stop being mean. Then he confessed that he was just trying to be cool. I told him to leave me alone. He followed me even more after that. He signed up for the clubs I was in, stole my personal items, stalked me, talked about me, and tried to get the same schedule as me. I couldn't prove he was the one who stole my things, so the principal couldn't do anything. He tried to get on the bus with me. He told everyone we were dating and in a great relationship. I told everyone that we weren't. He convinced my language arts teacher to let us be partners, and he just stared at me while I did most of the work that he copied off of. I was obsessed with good grades. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told the school counselor, and she talked to Josh and his parents. He told me he was sorry and asked if we could be friends. He told my school counselor before, and he talked to me, so I was basically forced into this friendship. I had a birthday party which wasn't really a party. I would just hang out with one of my friends and eat cake and open presents. I chose Chris. We lived in the same neighborhood. We were good friends, and I texted him when the party was, and somehow Josh found out. He showed up at my doorstep. I was freaking out. My mom answered the door, telling Josh that I was somewhere else with my friend. I know it was mean, but I was scared of him. He got angry with me at school and tried to hit me, and his parents talked to the principal, and Josh could stay in the school but had to switch classes and stay away from me. Josh, for yours and my sake, let's never meet. Update. I forgot to type this last part. Josh lost his reputation at school. His friends are still friends with him out of pity, I'm assuming, and most of the girls stay away from him and are creeped out. There was a note that was slipped into my locker saying it was my fault everyone hates him. Some students are on Josh's side, saying I overreacted and that I lied when I said he came over to my house. Now it's summer and I haven't seen him since, but I have heard rumors from my school friends saying he got into juvie. I received a text from him about 2 weeks ago, and then I blocked him. He was asking me how I felt about him. I didn't text him back, but if I did, I would have told him that I hate him from the bottom of my heart. He told lies about me and how I did terrible things. One of the students lost her phone, and he told everyone I stole it. I got my locker and backpack searched. Everyone hated me, and I lost a few of my friends since they didn't want to be hated by the other students. Now I know they weren't very good friends. Thanks for ruining my reputation. To Josh, I don't want to see your stupid face and your ignorant personality, so stay away if you want all your teeth.
When I was 14, I had a paper route. Occasionally I would have to deliver newspapers to those without a subscription. One evening in the summer, I went to deliver the extra newspapers, and my mum wanted to come with me. My route would be just a few blocks, so we rode our bikes and the whole trip lasted for maybe 10 to 15 minutes max. This was back when people weren't too worried about locking their doors. I remember we left our garage door open, which was really dumb. When we got back, I got inside and saw that our sliding door was open. When we got back, I went inside and saw that our sliding door was open a little bit. Now, that is not too uncommon, but our dog was barking like crazy. My mum walked down the hall and comes back with a panicked look on her face. She very seriously asked me if I had been in her room. I tell her no. She tells me to go inside my room and lock the door. Someone had been in the house. I look out the bedroom window, which faces the backyard, and I can see my mum looking around. She comes back inside and tells me to come to her room. On the floor, all of my dad's guns were laid out. They were usually in their gun cases, but right now they were all out of the cases and laying in a row. He had about 5 guns, and they were always hidden in the back of his closet. We were scared. My mum called Dad to come home from work, but I don't know why she didn't call the cops. My dad looked around and, of course, found nobody and nothing that was taken out of the house. My mum's purse was out on the kitchen table, and that had not been taken. My dad hadn't told anyone about his guns being hidden in the closet, though. How did someone know we had left? We had one creepy neighbor next door, which we didn't really suspect at the time. I'm just glad we did not walk in before they left. There must have been more than one person, because my mum's room was in the back of the house. A second person must have been looking out the window and seen us coming at that time. That was many years ago, and we still talk about how scary that was.
To begin with, I'm a girl and I moved to a different street in the same town. We had to move out of our old house that we were renting because somebody was interested in buying it. I was 13. We moved our stuff by our car and didn't bother using a truck since The house was in the same town. I had my own luggage, and when my family was inside, I was outside with my sister. Her name is Sammy. Anyway, a neighbor was outside on the porch and would glance at us. He told us he was 31 and he was Caucasian and always had messy clothing on. Being the paranoid freak I was, I told my sister. She was 10. Sammy shrugged it off, saying I was being too cautious. My mom is also extremely paranoid, and when I go outside alone or with friends, she says don't talk to strangers, don't follow people, the usual stuff. I felt safe in our town because it's been a year since my old encounter with a guy who tried to steal my dog, and I haven't seen him since. I've never really felt comfortable talking about my experiences, but I decided to write most of them this year. Anyway, the neighbors seemed friendly. Me and my sister let our guard down and told him our names and ages. I know, that's a terrible idea, but he already greeted our parents and didn't seem creepy. Yet. That was the first day. So, after a week of living in the house, whenever I walked past, he would always greet me. It seemed a little strange that he was always on his front porch when I left for school and when I came back. I never thought anything of it. One time, he followed me to the bus stop. I was talking to my friend Sophia. Just casual school stuff, and I didn't notice he had followed me. I felt scared, and Sophia seemed to just reply with, okay, or yeah, sure, to whatever he had to say. She told her parents, and she was more careful since all the neighbor did was talk to us about appropriate things. He talked kind of like an old friend. This continued. He would watch me from his porch, so I started leaving from my deck that led to the backyard. There were stairs, in case you were wondering. I never told my parents yet since I thought maybe he just hung out there frequently. I was walking our foster dog, a greyhound named Goose. The neighbor petted him and talked about the dog. He laughed at his name. It sort of freaked me out since he laughed until he couldn't breathe. It was just a name. And then he said out of nowhere, "Why do you keep leaving from the yard to go to the bus stop?" Wait, what? Maybe I misheard him, or I hoped so. He repeated his question. I felt anxious, and I have anxiety problems. I was always told not to be rude to adults and to be honest. My parents are from China and are really strict on not lying, and I was punished if I did so, and I felt nervous lying. I like seeing the flowers in the backyard. That was a lie, but he seemed to believe me, so I think I came up with a good excuse. 2 days later, his backyard was packed with flowers. I actually have allergies, but they weren't that bad since I would stay away from his backyard. We lived in townhouses, so the houses touched each other and had the same layout. He now spent his time in his backyard balcony. He would always try to talk to me, but I made excuses like how I was going to be late for the bus or my friends are waiting. My parents made me go 5 minutes before the time the bus came in case it was early. He figured that out when he confronted me when I was outside walking my dog. Now, I'm an indoor person and dislike spending my time outside most of the time, so that was usually the only time he would see me. He said, "You're always early for the bus. You could stay for a little to talk." He seemed paler than usual. My fists were balled up. I was ready to run if I had to, but I decided to talk it out. My parents want me to go early, so I don't miss the bus, and I talked to my friends. The man nodded and seemed to calm down. He told me to have a nice day. I nodded and walked away quickly. I decided not to tell my parents since my mom had enough stress recovering from a surgery from her ankle and was working at her new job. She was stressed when my dad and her would get into fights. They would just yell for a minute and then leave each other alone for a while, and then it would be okay. My dad would sometimes get annoyed that she stayed home for a long time recovering. My friend Chris would come over a few times a month. I really liked him as a friend, and we were both 13 at the time. I turned 14 in April, and the creepy neighbor gave me a gift. It was a gift card and a happy birthday card from Walmart. I ended up giving the gift card to my sister and throwing out the birthday card. When Chris came over, the creepy neighbor wouldn't say anything, but just stare at me. I told Chris I felt extremely uncomfortable around my neighbor. Chris thought I was overreacting, but decided to help if I needed it. I still felt safe, just creeped out. This same process continued over the school year and into summer. I had a community pool in my town, and I would go if my friends or sometimes family were going. Chris's family got there first, but my family wasn't going, and my mom said I could go to the pool and meet my friend. I had a bathing suit on, but was wearing regular clothing over my bathing suit. The neighbor ran inside quickly and came out with his swim shorts and a towel after he saw me. He also had the pool badge that allows you to go to the pool. I had a towel and a pair of goggles, so I guess it was easy for him to guess that I was going to the pool. Before he ran inside, I'd started running, knowing he would do something. I felt scared again. He was driving a car and stopped next to me when I was walking and asked, "Do you want to ride?" I said no thanks, and then he drove to the pool. When I meet my friend there, I didn't need a badge since I was hanging out with them. The neighbor saw me, but surprisingly, he didn't come up and say hi. I took off my clothes and had a bikini on. Great. I felt very uncomfortable, but I stayed close to my friend and forgot about my creepy neighbor for a while. Chris and I swam for about half an hour before getting out and drying ourselves. The neighbor walked up to Chris and I and asked, "Are you guys dating?" What the fuck? I just stood there, not really knowing what to say. Chris and I exchanged faces. I nodded and I glanced at Chris, sort of asking him. He nodded with an awkward look on his face. He seemed to understand the problem. He felt uncomfortable too. "You guys are too young," he then started ranting. I don't really remember what he said, but he would just complain. His parents weren't close enough to hear. He didn't tell his parents, and I thanked Chris and told him that I owed him my life. We didn't talk to each other for a while due to the awkward situation. I felt relieved since the neighbor left me alone for a few months, but then he started asking me if we were friends. I would usually make up excuses and leave, and then avoid him as best as I could. I bumped into him one day when I was walking with one of my friends. He asked if he could talk to me alone. My friend didn't move. I was getting tired of this guy. I decided I was going to tell him to leave me alone. So I told my friend to wait there because I didn't want to drag her into this. He started talking to me. "Maybe you can come over and talk about things. Did you break up yet?" "No, I don't want to come over. I know you're trying to be nice, but can you leave me alone? I have to take care of things." I lied. It was summer. I had no school and no work. He balled up his fist again. "I was nice to you. I planted flowers and talked to you. I really want to spend time together. I like you." My heart stopped. Did he really just say that? I decided to tell him how I feel. No, because I don't feel the same way, and I just want to be left alone. He got even angrier, so I sprinted away, yelling at my friend to run, who was a few feet away from me in front. We hid in her yard and lost the neighbor. He didn't talk to me again for a week, and then he started again. I told the police, and I haven't seen him since then after he was questioned. Update. Of course, this experience doesn't end here. Little did I know, this jerk came back to his house since he didn't have any physical contact with me or say more vile things. I didn't even know until my cat ran outside and I went to the porch to catch her. Then I saw him. "What's your cat's name?" he asked, as if nothing was wrong. I bolted back inside my house, closing and locking the door. He kept ringing the doorbell for 5 minutes and then left. I knew calling the cops wouldn't help because, apparently, one of his family members is a cop and let him off. I checked and locked all the doors and windows, closed the blinds, and called one of my friends in case anything happened. Eventually, he ended up moving since the town forced him to.
So this is something that happened to me a few weeks ago. I'm a 19-year-old female and I have EMT training. That'll be relevant in just a minute. Okay, so my friend and I were driving to Walmart. It was about 10:30 at night. We live in what used to be the meth capital of the United States. I don't think our state is the meth capital anymore, though. We were stopped at a stoplight in the turn lane to go into the Walmart parking lot. 2 cars passed us, going at a regular speed. My friend was driving and I was on the phone with one of our other friends. All of a sudden, I heard my friend Anna say, "Hey, did that car just crash?" Intrigued, I looked up and saw the 2 cars that had just passed us in an accident, maybe 100 feet in front of us. I was kind of excited, which sounds awful, but I had just finished my EMT training not too long before, so I told her to get into the other lane and go over to the accident so we could check it out. When we got there, the car that had been hit had 2 people in it, male crackhead and female crackhead. Male crackhead was pissed. The car that had been behind them hit them from the back and made their car spin off into the grassy area off the side of the road. Female crackhead was screaming in the front seat about how her hip hurt and her head and anything else, but when we asked if they wanted us to call an ambulance, they said no. They also didn't want us to call the police. Oh, we weren't about to do that, so we called the police anyway. It was hard to pinpoint their exact location, so it took them forever to get there. While we were waiting, I kept checking on female crackhead, and she kept changing her story about where she was hurt and would only act hurt when I asked her if she was okay. In the other car, the one that hit them, was a super sweet 18-year-old boy. He was terrified. Oh, we kind of figured out the situation. Crackhead car slammed on their brakes and didn't use their turn signal, and the boy didn't have enough time to stop. While we were waiting for the police to arrive, a black Jeep pulled up behind the crackhead's car, and male crackhead started throwing a bunch of stuff into a diaper bag they had in the back seat before handing it off to the guy in the black Jeep, who then proceeded to drive away. When the police got here, Anna and I gave them a statement and told them what was going on, and crackhead guy overheard us telling the police how it was pretty much their fault and how we were pretty sure male crackhead had given drugs to the black Jeep that came along. Anyway, once the police were done with us, Anna and I left to go to Walmart. When we turned into Walmart, a red car had followed us in. I was on the phone, this time with my mum, telling her about the weird accident we had witnessed. Well, we pulled into a parking spot, and the red car pulled in 2 spots down from us. I wasn't paying any attention. Thank God Anna was there, or this might have ended really bad. Anna nudged me and said, Hey, I think that car followed us in here. Now they're staring at us." I shrugged her off and told her she was being crazy. Well, when I looked over, there were 2 guys in the red car, and they were staring at us. When they noticed us, they swept out of the parking space and drove all the way around to the other side of the parking lot, and they kept staring at us. Anna was freaked out, so she decided we should just leave and go to a different Walmart. So we pulled out of our parking spot, quickly, and started driving towards the exit. Red car guy immediately hit the gas and drove all the way to our exit where he was blocking us in. That's when we noticed it was the same man who had been driving in the Jeep earlier. Freaked out, we put it in reverse and found a different way to get out of the parking lot, and we drove back to where the police were still at the accident and told them everything that had happened. The black Jeep came back while we were talking to the police with a different driver, and they ran the plates and found out the owner of the Jeep had assault and weapon charges. That was probably the most freaked out I've ever been. But I'm so grateful that my friend Anna is aware of her surroundings, because who knows what would have happened if he would have gotten out of the car and went into Walmart.
I live in New Jersey, in Rockaway. I lived in a townhouse and had many streets and neighbors. I'm a girl and was 12 at the time. I was walking a foster dog who was a pit bull terrier mix. He was both dog and people friendly. His name is Shaka. Many people petted him, but one guy scared me. I was walking Shaka when some guy walked up to me and asked if he could pet him. I said yes. This guy looked 30 or 40. I wasn't really sure. He began asking more questions about the dog: breed, age, name, and where I got him. I had and still have anxiety. I told him the shelter and explained we were fostering him. He asked if he could hold the leash. I said no, and the man seemed to get angry. Then he started asking questions about me. How old are you? Where do you live? What's your name? I didn't want to be rude, so I told him my name. Not a smart thing to do. I have to go now, I said, as I was trying to get away from him. I'll take your dog for you, and you can drop by my house and pick him up later. I said no and made an excuse to leave. Do you want to be my friend? He kept following me. I didn't want to go home so he would know where I lived. I told him I didn't need friends. I was getting scared and didn't really know what else to say. I don't have any friends. Then Shaka can be my friend. My dog didn't seem to know what was happening and got nervous. He's adopted by someone else. I have to go, I lied. I have a puppy. Would you like to see her? He probably didn't have a puppy in retrospect. No, I'm really busy. I have to go. I was hyperventilating and getting scared. He tried to grab the leash, but I pulled back. Your dog looks so nice. I think I want to adopt him. He lunged towards me. I started running. I must have been in better shape than he was, because I lost him and ended up on another street. Now, I'm even more paranoid. So to the guy who tried to take my dog, let's not meet again. Ever.
So, this happened 15 years ago when I was 12. My family and I are super into dance. We attend all kinds of competitions, state championships, nationals, etc. Lots of times our competitions would require travel to different states. This time, we went to Vegas. Mind you, even though I was 12, I always looked and acted a lot older, and I could easily be mistaken for maybe 16, but still. This experience had always stayed in my mind as one of the most what the fuck moments. I also watched a lot of Unsolved Mysteries and Lifetime as a kid, so thank God I did, because I'm pretty sure they saved my life. We were in Vegas for a dance competition, and on one of our non-competition days, we decided to go exploring. It was me, my mum, my aunt, and my 3 younger sisters. There was this really cool place right along the strip called the Lua or something, with a Hawaiian theme. It was kind of like a little square with different random vendors, an animal, a magic show, and different food options. At one point, the rest of my family was watching some parrot act, and I and my younger sister, who was maybe 10 at the time, were walking around the different vendors looking at jewelry and such. That was when an older man, maybe early 30s, from my memory who had a heavy Mid-Eastern accent, approached the stand we were at. He came to stand next to me and said hello. I responded with a smile and said hi back. I've always been very polite and talkative and assumed he was one of the vendors. He asked me what we were doing there, how I liked Vegas, various harmless-seeming questions. Harmless until my sister walked back to our mum to watch the show. That was when it got creepy, and he started telling me how pretty I was. Asked if my sister was my daughter, which I laughed at and told him I was only 12, etc. At one point, he asked me if I liked jewelry, and I told him I thought it was very pretty, but that I didn't have any money on me, and I was just looking. His response was, "I own a shop around the corner, and the pretty woman," again, I'd already told him I was only 12, "like you deserves pretty things. If you come with me, I'll let you pick out anything you want for free." Now, at this point, my lifetime movie experiences are kicking in as I'm panicking, and all kinds of things flash through my head about what will happen if I leave with him. I politely decline, but he keeps insisting, and at the point has taken hold of my arm to steer me in the direction of an alley where his shop is. In my dumb panic, I kind of just freeze. Then I say, "Yeah, I'll come right back. I have to check in or my mum will freak." He smiled and said okay, let go of my arm and said, "Come this way when you're ready, gorgeous," pointing again in the direction of the alley. I booked it back to my family, but didn't say anything, just stayed quietly, silently panicking about the whole experience. When we got up to leave, we had to walk past the alley, where he kept gesturing for me to follow him, and when I ignored him, the smile he had kept on his face the whole time turned to a glare, and I noped the fuck out of there as fast as possible without freaking out my mum. So, to creepy shop guy in Vegas, let's not ever meet again.
So this literally just happened. I was driving home from my boyfriend's place at around 12:30 a.m. when I noticed a car following me a little too closely. I pumped the brakes to politely tell him to fuck off and continue on my merry way. I hope this car will pass me, but he remains on my tail. I think of what I've learned on this very subreddit and consider the chance that he's following me. I decide to put this to the test. I flip on my turn signal to make my typical route home, and when I see him do the same, I continue straight instead. And what do you know? He does the same thing. This is when I start freaking out. At this point, I feel I should mention that I did consider the possibility that maybe he was trying to alert me, to tell me something was wrong with my car, and I even checked the back seat, thinking back on the old urban legend. But he'd had plenty of chances to pull next to me and alert me of any potential problems, and I'd rather be safe than sorry. As I'm weaving through random residential streets trying to lose this guy, I call my mom. I tell her that someone's following me, and she says to come home and run inside right away. I hear her calling my dad, a big dude whose favorite hobbies include fishing and gun collecting, to come outside and check it out. As I begin nearing my neighborhood, this fucker starts flashing his brights and honking at me. I pull in the driveway and haul ass inside, just as I see my dad come out the door and head toward the mysterious car, which is now parked right in front of our mailbox. He told my dad that I had almost hit him. I assume he's referring to me pumping my brakes, and he thought I was drunk. So, since his aunt died in a drunk driving accident, he wanted to make sure I got home safely. Then he left. Not because my dad scared the shit out of him, but because I was safe. What a gentleman. We weren't convinced. If he thought I was drunk, which he had no reason to, it's more likely that he would have stayed the hell away from me instead of tailgating me all the way home. At least, that would be the smart thing to do. And if he merely wanted to make sure I got home safely, he wouldn't have been flashing his brights and honking at me or parking in front of my house after I had clearly arrived home safe and sound. So, concerned citizen who takes the law into his own hands by following 19-year-old girls home at 12:30 a.m., let's not meet.
A little backstory. I used to live in a moderately safe neighborhood. We had the occasional burglaries, but nothing out of the ordinary. At the time, I was 17 years old, and my boyfriend and his friends decided to call me in the middle of the fucking night while I was with my friend Stacy for her sleepover. My boyfriend told us that they were at the nearby 7-Eleven and wanted to meet us, Bear in mind, it was around 10 p.m., so we were pretty reluctant. They convinced us by offering free food. I know, but we were teenagers, so we decided to meet them. Yeah. Stacy's parents were away for the weekend, so it wasn't a problem for us to go out. We got to the 7-Eleven by 10:30 p.m. and got food and sat around outside. It was getting quite late, and if I can remember properly, it was around 1:30 a.m. when I decided that it was time to go back. Stacy was pretty trashed, and I had a couple of drinks myself, so naturally we said we couldn't drive home. In retrospect, I feel extremely stupid for ever going out that night, and I completely regret it. We were only a couple of blocks from home, so we decided that we would walk back. We were just about to turn onto the corner near Stacy's house, when all of a sudden, we hear a loud, "Hey, girls!" We both quickly turned around and saw probably a middle-aged man around 6 foot walking towards us. It was 1:45 in the morning, and this guy was wearing a grey shirt and some shorts. I came to a realization that this was not normal, and that we should probably walk faster and ignore this guy. In the shock we both had sobered up, and had come to our senses, so we started to walk faster. By the time we were around 4 houses down from home, Stacy turned around to see that the guy was following us quite quickly. He was saying stuff like, "Hey girls, come here," and "You girls sure run fast. You girls stayed at 7-Eleven for a very long time." By now I was freaking out, because he must have followed us back from the 7-Eleven and we didn't even notice. He was now running pretty fast and it was dark, so all we could hear were quick footsteps on the sidewalks. I didn't want him to know where we were staying, so we rushed behind one of the trees and waited. Yeah, it was really dumb, but we had no other choice. We thought it worked because he stopped following us and walked back around the corner. We waited another 10 minutes just to be sure and ran back home. As soon as we got in, we double-locked the door, turned all the lights off and rushed upstairs. Now, Stacy's house had a pretty secure backyard with high fences and a padlocked gate, so we felt safe. We were both petrified though, and naturally we didn't want to fall asleep. I called my boyfriend and explained what had happened, and he said that it was just some druggie. Nevertheless, I broke up with him a week after the incident. Around half an hour later, we heard a large bang coming from inside the house. At that moment, Stacy and I were about to go to sleep when we heard it. I grabbed the nearest thing to me, which so happened to be a fucking dildo. Dear God, we teenagers were dumb. So I opened the door a little bit to see nothing in the corridor, so we assumed it must have been the wind or something. Don't judge me, we were still pretty out of it and exhausted. Just as we were about to close the door, we heard the back door slide open. This person was actually in our house now, and Stacy started crying. Adrenaline pumped through me as I ran down the hallway and threw the dildo down the stairs. We heard it drop to the bottom with a thud and shuffling, and then the back door slide open and closed again. I was absolutely screaming my head off now, yelling, "Get the fuck out of our house or we will call the police!" After about 15 minutes of silence, we decided to head downstairs quietly and check out what happened. Apparently someone broke the glass in the kitchen by throwing a rock through it, and that was the bang we heard, and he used that to unlock the slide door. We knew that this person was still out there, so we decided to call the cops. They came around 20 minutes later and called it a forced entry and burglary. Stacy's parents came home early after we told them what happened, and they got extra locks for every door in the house. I still get quite cautious whenever I come back from any store past 8:30 p.m. Stacy was very reluctant to leave the house at night after that, and after high school, we lost contact.
I spent the first 10 years of my life in the city of San Jose, California. When my mother could afford it, she would take me to a theme park in the neighboring town of Sunnyvale called Great America. We went there about once or twice a year. The rides were fun, food was good, and I wasn't paying, so I had a good time whenever we went. Except once, at around age 7. About an hour or two into the day, I got that feeling. You know the one, when you get the sneaking suspicion that someone you can't see is watching your every move. I mentioned it to my mom, and she said I was imagining things. We went on about our day, and it was fun, as usual, but I couldn't shake that feeling. All day it got steadily worse, until I was literally begging my mom to take me home. Eventually, she obliged, but couldn't figure out what had gotten into me. Now, a little backstory. My parents got divorced when I was only a baby. When I was about 11, they reconnected and decided to get back together, and so we moved to a shitty little town up north called Eureka. My dad's dad, I refuse to refer to him as my grandfather, lived in the same town and never talked to anyone, not even my dad. He was, in every sense of the word, a recluse. He passed away not long after we moved there, and my dad, being his next of kin, was tasked with going through his things. The first word that came to mind when we entered the house was paranoid. There was at least one rifle in every single room of the house, sometimes 2 or 3. There was a Colt 45 under his pillow, another under the driver's seat of his car, and a snub-nosed 38 in a Ziploc bag in the back pot of the toilet. Cameras were mounted on every exterior wall, and boxes upon boxes of VHS tapes with the collected recordings from these cameras, some of which were nearly worn out from repeated viewing. Suddenly, from the master bedroom, I hear my mom yell, "What the fuck?" My mom rarely swore in front of me, so I knew something was seriously wrong. I ran to the bedroom, and what I saw in my mother's hand shocked me to my core. It was a photo of me and my mother at the theme park. I was around 7, walking along with a corn dog in one hand, drink in the other, and I had a suspicious look on my face. I instantly remembered that day. My mother told me she felt faint and left the room. As it turned out, there were around 30 pictures of us from that day, as well as some from other times and places, some of them taken from within arm's reach. I'd never felt more creeped out in my life, and haven't since. I don't know why he was spying on us, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to.
So, I'm a college freshman in the South. I'm also a female. Before I start my story, I'd like to give a short description of myself. I am a short, chubby black female. When I say short, I believe I'm just underneath average height, so 5'4"-ish. Anyway, my college was across the street from a rundown gas station, where I happened to work. On a night that I was working, my boss left me alone for that night because he hadn't gotten any sleep. Or, that is what he said. But it was a pretty slow day. There wasn't a specific reason why it was slow, it just was. Anyway, I was playing Geometry Dash on my phone as I sat behind the counter. It wasn't a counter with a thick glass and speaking tube, it was just a regular counter. As I played my game, I heard the door open. I looked up to see a man, about average height and very skinny, but for some reason a little intimidating. I was never the one to be afraid of anyone, so when I say he was intimidating, he was. He was balding with a little comb over. He had on a dingy white t-shirt with holes and dad jeans that were caked in a dark red substance and mud. It seemed like he just got back from hunting, but I'm not sure. He looked at me. His eyes were hollow and empty, but still I smiled. "Hello, how are you?" Common southern hospitality. He muttered something. I couldn't hear him and went to the back of the store. I watched him for a while before I eventually got bored and went back to my game. After about a minute of aggravation, I clicked off the game and went to scroll down Instagram. When I glanced up, he was standing behind the aisle, just watching me. Upon reflex, I put my head back down, looking at my phone, but something told me to look back up. When I did, he was standing at the counter, holding gummy worms and a beer. Did you find everything okay, sir? I say, a little startled, but I was okay. He didn't say anything, he just dug through his pockets and pulled out a dirty $10 bill. The total is $5.68, I say, as I grabbed the money, smiling at him. After I handed him back his change, out of nowhere he shouts, "I hate all you niggers! You and the damn vetbacks!" Taken aback by his comment, I couldn't say anything. I was just stunned. "Oh, you don't got nothing to say, huh? You niggers always have something to say. Never know when to shut your goddamn mouths. I swear to God, if I could hang you, I would." I gasped. I was about to tell him to get his fucking worms and can of spit and get the fuck out. But a few college guys burst through the damn door, alerting the both of us. He grabbed his shit and walked out. Luckily, I knew one of the college students was someone that I had known. "Hey there," he smiled. "Bring me some Doritos and an Arizona iced tea." I guess the look on my face gave him an idea of how I was feeling. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, that man that walked out said he wished he could hang me. He started off with these racist comments. I didn't even do anything," I told him. Now, I wasn't crying, I was just really mad. My friend asked me if he should go look for him, and I told him no. "I'll be fine," I assured him. He nodded and he asked for a pen and paper. I ripped a piece of receipt paper off and handed him the counter pen. "Okay, call me if you need me," he says, writing his phone number down. His other friends came around with a bunch of food, and after that, they were on their way. After about 2 hours or so, my boss and another co-worker came in, which means that I was off. I gathered my things, forgetting the whole incident, and told them good day. I left and began my journey across the street. After about a good mile or so, I heard someone yell, "Hey sir, there a reason for you to be here tonight?" I looked back to see campus security talking to a lanky man. My eyes began to focus into the darkness when I noticed it was the racist guy from the station. His eyes were locked on me, and it made me even more uncomfortable. He didn't even respond, which made it menacing enough for me to just leave. I began to walk quicker to my dorm, and just forgot about the whole thing. He just called, I was okay, nothing else happened. The next day in the Union Center, I was doing some homework at a table, and when I was listening to some music, when the guy that I know sat down. "Hey, so I'm glad you made it back okay," he smiles. I nodded. "Yeah, thanks." He sighs. "Because they found some guy on campus last night with a pistol and a hunting knife." My stomach dropped when he said that. He was this skinny white man. He kept mumbling some pretty racist shit under his breath, so I thought that was the guy that you told me about last night. He finished. Told him that I thought that it was, that he was following me back to my dorm last night. As I thought, he was also stunned for words. "So, fucked up racist dickhead weirdo? Let's not meet, okay?"
A few years ago, my partner and I moved from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest. We didn't know anyone in this city. We just saved up a decent chunk of money and hopped on a plane. It was exciting, and we certainly haven't regretted it. The plan was to stay at hostels and cheap hotels until we could find work in an apartment. Finding work was actually quite easy for us. We had new jobs within a week of getting off the plane. Finding somewhere to live, though, was a nightmare. Everywhere we looked had incredibly steep requirements for credit scores and minimum household income. We tried more legitimate sites at first, but after 2 months of hopping around to various hostels, motels, and Airbnb places, we became desperate. So we went to Craigslist. Many of the listings we tried gave us just as much trouble at first. So, one day, I'm desperately scouring Craigslist for rooms, and I come across one that seemed a little weird. The poster said that he had a very large house in a nice neighborhood and that he wanted to rent out a 500 square foot room for $600 per month, utilities included. In this city, that was suspiciously cheap. He also wrote it in a rambling sort of way. It was almost half ad for a room, and half open letter to anyone that had recently accused him of being creepy. Now, obviously, if we weren't so desperate, we wouldn't have even considered contacting this man, but we thought that we might have been at risk of running out of money before we could get in somewhere at this rate, so we gave him a call. On the phone, he sounded relatively normal. He actually suggested that we meet up with him in a public place to talk about the room first. We agreed to meet him at a restaurant near the hostel we were staying at, though we didn't tell him which one, of course. He showed up late and looked surprised to actually see us there. He sat down and he talked for a long time. I say he talked rather than we talked, because he rambled non-stop about himself and how he felt persecuted by everyone in this city. He claimed to be an artist and a collector. In between him repeating himself many times about how the locals just don't understand his passions, he also told us that the room he had advertised was currently filled with his collection. He never once stated what he had collected, and that if things went well, he would have to hire people to move it into storage before we could move in. At one point, he stopped talking abruptly and ran to the restroom. We took this opportunity to discuss the situation. We knew at this point that he was probably a crazy person, but the threat of homelessness was looming, so we agreed that we should at least see the place and decide based on that rather than his eccentricities. He came back to the table sweaty and flustered. We weren't sure why at the time, but we figured it out later. Before we could say anything, he blurted out, "I want to show you the apartment right now." We were surprised by this, but we had just discussed seeing it, so we agreed. I asked him to text me the address and that we would take public transportation and meet him there. He insisted that he drive us there since we didn't own a car. Now, we were obviously hesitant to get in his truck. It was obvious even to him, I think, but the previously mentioned desperation was still a thing, and we were pretty sure he wasn't going to try and hurt us. We were right, but it was still a bad decision in retrospect. So we crammed into the front seat of his tiny, rusty, ancient-looking pickup truck. My partner was pressed up against the door, and I was uncomfortably close to the driver as he continued his babble about how the city had gone downhill and how everyone he used to hang out with shuns him these days. At one point, I whispered to my partner to get ready for a possible tuck-and-roll situation. He saw me whispering, but couldn't hear me over the wind roaring through the cab of the truck. One of the windows was broken out, really added to the vehicle's charms. And he said something about how we were romantic together and how he envied our youth. We arrived at his house minutes after that. He had been technically honest up to this point. His neighborhood was decent looking, and his home was a pretty large one-story ranch house. I noted out loud that he had bars on all of his windows and several locks on his front door. He said that his collection was very valuable to him, and he was just protecting it from thieves. Once he let us in, I made a point of urging him ahead so that he wouldn't get a chance to lock the door behind us. We very quickly noticed 3 things: his art, his collection, and the smell. This man's method of art, of which he was very proud, was apparently to take lots of innocent childlike things, baby dolls, stuffed animals, ceramic figurines, children's toys, etc., and attach dildos to them. One of the most notable pieces being the one he referred to as his unicorn. It was a ceramic horse figurine that he sloppily sawed the head off and replaced with a baby doll's head and added a hand-sculpted clay penis as the horn. His collection mainly consisted of rubber, plastic, and latex clothing, and gas masks. Both his collection and his art was everywhere. The place was so jam-packed with junk that every room only had a single file path going through it, so you could walk without bumping into the arts or stepping on piles of fetish wear. This fellow was definitely not concerned about cleanliness. The place reeked of mildew and moldy rubber. The carpet looked as if it hadn't seen a vacuum since the 1970s. As we passed through the kitchen, he declared that he loves cast iron pans because you don't have to wash them. Just as we noticed that every countertop was cluttered with rusted pans that all looked to have decades worth of scorched food caked on. We stayed behind him, mostly silent, as he stopped every now and then to point out his favorite art pieces and to repeatedly tell us he was leading us to the room and that it was full of his favorite stuff right now, but that he'd get people to move it out for us. He said that like us moving in was a sure thing. He opened the door to the room and actually said, "Voila." I don't doubt that the room was around 500 square feet, but every inch of it was stuffed with clothing racks. The clothing racks were all packed with the same thing: shiny rubber, latex, and plastic pairs of pants, with dildos sewn to the front of them. Up to this point, we were doing our best to avoid reacting to all the freaky stuff in this guy's home, because we were afraid he would snap on us if we did. But I started noticing after a while that he was getting disappointed that we weren't reacting to anything. My guess is that he gets off on shocking people with his creepy pants, and that this wasn't going as well as he had hoped. We told him that the room looked big enough and that we'd like to go back to our hotel and think it over. He didn't have much of a reaction to that, but he agreed to drive us home now. When he thought that I wasn't looking, he took something out of his pocket and tossed it through the open doorway of a dark room on his way past it. I was afraid that it might have been his car keys, so I used the light on my phone to peek in as we passed that room. The whole room was a pile of tied-off used condoms, or sperm balloons, as my partner called them later. We later speculated that he was masturbating at the restaurant and added a balloon to the pile before taking us back. So, we piled back into his truck and had a long, awkward drive back to the place that we had met. His rambling was much more frustrated this time around, and he passed where we wanted to get out 3 times before we just jumped out at a red light, frantically shouting, "This is good. Well, it was nice meeting you. Thanks. Bye." I added his number to my contacts as Mr. Creepy Pants. Over the next several days, he sent a few texts asking if we talked it over yet. I wanted to be polite, so I just said, "We've decided against it, but thank you for the very nice offer." He responded with the phrase, "Are you creeped yet?" copied and pasted over and over about 30 times. I'm not sure why I was still trying to be polite, but when he stopped spamming me, I responded, "No, we thought that your collection was lovely, but it's just so large that we can't bring ourselves to ask you to move it." It took him a few more days to respond, but he did, and he took it better than I had expected. "Yeah, I really didn't want to move it. Thanks for understanding." He then made a recommendation for a local burger place for some reason. I blocked his number shortly after that, just to be safe. For the record, we didn't care that he was a fetishist of some sort. We cared that he was really freaking gross. So, Mr. Creepy Pants, let's not meet again.
This happened in a little Brazilian country town with about 20,000 inhabitants. It's a rather safe place, but there is some drug stuff going down between the lower and the upper part of the city. Me and my friend Jose live on what you can call the transition from downtown to the upper parts, just at the foot of one of the hills. We were just 6-year-old kids playing completely alone on the streets in front of Jose's house, when a sketchy but friendly group of 5 dudes in bikes pass, and one of them calls my friends, "Hey, little goatling." In Portuguese, it doesn't sound weird. He called him Gabritinho. The diminutive form sounds tender and playful, something your grandpa would call you. My friend shouts back the augmentative, "Hey, big goat." I hear bike skids, the dude stops, and then all of them are stopping. His attitude does a complete 180 in 1 second. I look him in his face, and what was playfulness is now pure anger. He throws the bike on the ground. We try to run, but the gates are on the other side of the street, and rather far for our short legs. We're all alone, and they are turning in our direction. One rush, and the guys are now up in our face. He pulls a gun and shoves it in the face of my friend while the dude surrounds us against the wall. He asks my friend, "What did you just call me?" "I'm sorry. "What did you just call me? I'm sorry." While they were talking, his Aunt Regina storms out the gate and runs towards us, passes between the big guys and picks him up and shouts, "Leave him alone! Leave him alone!" The guy puts down the gun. Now he's smart. He now retreats to the bike and leaves with the group. This must have happened in about 1 minute. One of the longest minutes in my life. We just hugged his aunt, crying. The sheer overreaction of that dude. I can't believe he pulled a gun because of that. Thank you, guys, and thanks to Regina.
Just to clarify, I'm a female and in my early 20s now. This happened when I was about 12 years old. I was in year 8. I'm guessing that that's the same thing as 8th grade in America. Anyway, I was on my way home from school with my friend Kira. Kira was really small and had very childlike features. She was also extremely timid and easily scared. We decided to take a quick detour to the local supermarket for a drink and some snacks. Although this was frightening at the time, I'm glad I made that detour, and you'll understand why very soon. We got into the shop and went straight to the sweets aisle. It was fairly empty. There was only me, Kira, and a young Muslim girl who stood staring at all the variety of sweets. She was smaller than Kira, and like I said, Kira was small. If I had to put an age on this girl, I would say she was about 7 or 8. I couldn't see her parents, but just assumed they told her to choose some sweets and then return to them. I'm a very observant person naturally, and will instantly react if I see someone in danger or figure out what to do if I notice anything suspicious. As we were browsing for sweets, I noticed in the corner of my eye that a man stood at the bottom of the aisle, staring. I ignored it for a moment, thinking he was checking what aisle he needed, but he stayed. He didn't move. I shot a glance over to him and tried to work out why he stood there. The man was also clearly a Muslim. I would say around the age of 30. For a second, I figured he must be her father, but something didn't seem right. He was staring blankly at her. I turned to the little girl and then back to the man. I did this several times, and with no doubt in my mind, I knew he was watching her. If he was with her, he would have surely walked over to her or called her name. He wasn't her father, her uncle, her brother. I looked towards him again for a moment, and I could tell his eyes were so fixated on her that he hadn't noticed me staring at him. I looked away as not to stare too long, but it was still bothering me. I could still see him in the corner of my eye. I need to intervene, I thought silently. Kira had been talking continuously at this point, but somewhere in the conversation I had switched off. She tugged my arm and I turned to her. Something had to be done. This girl's parents were nowhere in sight, and I knew I was the only person who could potentially stop whatever sick ideas this man had for this girl. I looked back at the sweets, but kept the little girl in the corner of my eye as I told Kira to be quiet and I explained what was going on. "Shit," she whispered. "What do we do?" I had been thinking while she panicked. Brave, but very naive 12-year-old me decided to go stand with the girl. "We're going to walk over to her. As we stand next to her, you keep your eyes on the man. Don't take them off of him, Kira. I'm going to ask where her parents are." With that, we walked towards the girl, one of us at either side of her. My heart was racing for fear of what his intentions were. I tend to get very angry when I'm afraid, and my fear was solely for this girl. I knelt down beside her and said, "Hey, where are your parents?" She looked at me puzzled. I realize now that we look like the creeps, not him. I'm not sure. They told me to grab what I wanted and then go find them. I looked at her face, so sweet, so innocent. I replied, "Would it be okay if we helped you find your parents?" I didn't want her to go find them alone in case the man got a hold of her before they did. "Yes, please," she replied. Kira never took her eyes off of the creep the entire time I was speaking to the little girl. She said he looked angry and sort of confused at what was going on, and he walked away just before we took her to find her parents. I took her hand and hurried her along as we searched for a few aisles for her mother and father. It didn't take long until we found them. I was relieved as she ran over to them and placed her sweets in the trolley. "Thank you," she said. Her parents looked at us with concern, so I approached them quickly to explain why she just thanked us. I told them that a man had been watching their daughter intensely for the past 5 minutes, and I was worried because I couldn't see her parents. They thanked me many times before I left the shop. I remember how terrified the mother looked as I told her. She took my hand and thanked me again before we left. It's over, I thought. The little girl is safe, and I'm so glad I took a detour. Me and Kira left the shop, and Kira decided she didn't want to go home yet, so insisted I come to her friend's house with her. "Not today. I really need to get home, otherwise my dad will start to worry." She nodded and set off in the opposite direction. I began walking home alone. I felt strange. Something in my gut was telling me to turn around. I walked through the car park and past the usual shops, and then I turned. He was behind me, merely yards away. As soon as I caught his eyes, I turned around and picked up pace. My heart was pounding. I was only 12, and I knew I couldn't outrun a grown man, and I was way too small to fight him. "Think," I screamed in my head. I kept passing shop after shop. No one was around. It was roughly an hour after school ended. By this point, and all of the school kids had been to the local shops and gone home, usually in large groups. The sweet shop, I thought to myself. At the top of this path I was on was a small sweet shop. Nearly all of the kids from school flocked there after school ended for their cheap sweets. I knew there was a security guard inside. He was always there. He watched out for the kids stealing sweets. If I can get to the shop before it closes, I'll be safe, I thought. It closed early on school days, as the only customers were us kids. I was hoping for dear life the shutters weren't down. I knew if it was closed, I didn't stand a chance. My route home was simple, but not so much if you're being chased. After I passed that shop, I had to turn right under a bridge and then climb some stone stairs to walk over the bridge and then walk up a large hill to get home. I didn't stand a chance. Not to mention I had severe asthma that was made worse when I was panicked or nervous. I picked up as much pace as possible without running. I didn't want him to think I was aware that I was being followed. He was walking at a steady pace, but keeping his eyes glued to me. Suddenly, as I was just about to reach the shop, I saw the security guard. He stepped out of the shop just as I reached it. I scurried over to him and told him everything that was going on. I told him what happened in the supermarket, and then that he was following me. I felt my heart pounding as the man slowly creeped closer. "I have to walk half a mile. Please." He cut me off, looking angry. "Go now. Don't stop walking. I'll stop him and keep him here as long as I can. Don't look back. Just move as fast as you can." I ran around the corner and heard the security guard yell, "Stop." I then speed walked as fast as my legs could carry me over the bridge. His voice faded as I walked further. I knew he wouldn't let the man hurt me. I felt okay. That feeling in my stomach had gone. I reached home with no problem. I never told my dad or grandparents, but like I say, I've always been cautious, and even if I put myself at risk, I'm glad I was able to help that little girl.
This story goes back a few years ago, when I was 16. I'm a girl. I just started an exchange program in Italy. I spoke no Italian whatsoever when I moved there, so my first few months were really hard. Through poor organizing and execution, I wasn't actually enrolled in the school, and the teachers ignored me because I couldn't follow the classes. So I developed the habit of getting dropped off outside the school, and instead of going in, I'd walk down the road and sit at the park for hours at a time until I felt the desire to either go to class, go to town, or just go home and hope the babysitter wasn't there. One particular day I was feeling pretty down. It was about 8:30 in the morning and I'd skipped class and walked straight to the park. I had to write letters, journal entries, but I was just too sad and homesick. I curled up on the park bench with my headphones in and cried. I remember I was resting on my back with my knees up, looking at the sky and trees, wondering how, and more importantly why, I decided to do such a silly thing, when I felt someone stroke my hair. My body snapped up and I flung myself at the other end of the bench. I was looking at a man, probably in his late 30s. He had the typical Italian dark hair and features, but was a little overweight and was smiling in a friendly manner. I didn't know what to say. He didn't look threatening, but I felt so uncomfortable internally. Something was weird. I was also now facing the problem that I would not be able to communicate with this person, as my Italian was still very poor, and I've always been one to choose friendliness over being blatant. He said, "Jesus loves you," but at that stage I could only translate literally, and those words are, "Jesus wants you good." I didn't know the word for Jesus yet, so to my ears, here's a guy that just stroked my hair while I was crying on a park bench, who just told me he wants me good. I tried to be polite and say I didn't understand. I was Australian, sorry, I must leave. But he just kept grinning, and the next thing I know, he's hugging me very tightly. I love to think, in those situations, I would snap into a sensible mode and just get the fuck out, but I still defaulted to polite. I pulled away and tried to explain again, but he grabbed me again and hugged me. This time I actually did push against his chest to get away, and after literally shoving him off me, I could feel he was much stronger than me, I began collecting my stuff and walked away. I didn't know which way to go. School and home were both bad options, so I just moved further along the path to another area of the park. He followed me, speaking in Italian. I think he was rambling on about Christianity and that I won't be sad if I have faith. He kept following. I tried to deter him, but my vocabulary was pretty much exhausted with, "Sorry, I go." I was trying to avoid eye contact so he wouldn't talk to me anymore, but he caught up again. When he got close enough, he said some more things and then reached forward for perhaps another hug, and I just moved out of the way. But he grabbed my wrist. I shook myself free and yelled no. Until then, I hadn't been sure if he was really a threat or just a harmless fanatic trying to do good in the world. But when I yelled, he instantly reached out again and stepped forward, and that was a big no-no. I noped straight out of there and ran home. The adrenaline finally outplayed my need to be nice. I'm pretty sure he followed me a bit of the way back, but never broke into a run, especially when I hit the main road. I got home and Skyped my parents. I didn't tell them what happened, but I needed to talk to someone instead of wallowing. I stuck to my classes after that. So, weird Italian Christian guy? I'm glad we didn't meet again. Let's keep it that way.
Growing up, my aunt and uncle owned a beach condo. My favorite way to spend the summer was to stay there with my family, specifically my cousin Charlie. We were absolutely inseparable growing up. There was a 1-year difference between us. The beach we stayed at was a very popular tourist beach on the SC coast, so in the summer it was incredibly busy. I'm talking barely any room between you and the family next to you. Now, my family would spend all day on the beach, from about 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The beach would stay crowded until about 5 p.m., and everyone would go back to their rooms to shower and go out to eat. So from around 5 to 7 every day was my favorite time to be outside. We would actually have room to run wild, build sandcastles, dig huge holes, and not have to worry about people knocking them down or being too close. Around 5:30 p.m. one day, my family decided they wanted to walk to the pier, about 2 miles away, and me and Charlie begged to stay so we could build sandcastles. We were 9 and 10 at the time, so they said we could stay as long as we didn't get in the water or leave our beach spot. The condo we stayed at was 1 row back, and we weren't allowed to cross the street without adults. We agreed to our terms and continued to build a row of sandcastles as they walked away. Around 5 minutes later, an extremely tall man wearing a floppy beach hat, sunglasses, with a dollop of sunscreen on his nose came straight up to us. He started commenting on how pretty our sandcastles were, asking how long it took us to build them that high, if it was just us two working on them, which I clearly see what he was getting at with these questions now. We were both extremely introverted kids. We thanked him, kept our answers short, and tried to ignore him as he still stood there asking us questions. All of a sudden, he got really quiet, started looking around at the mostly empty beach, and said he had to go meet his friend. He told us to stay right there so he could bring his friend back to look at how great our sandcastles were, and walked away from us. When he got away at a safe distance, me and Charlie both looked at each other and said, "We've got to get out of here." Side note, hell yeah at us for being smart kids. We immediately started weighing our options. We knew our family wouldn't be back for at least another 30 minutes. We also knew we weren't allowed to cross the street, and quite frankly, we were scared to. About 100 yards away is a tiny ramp overlooking the ocean. I believe it was a handicap access to the beach, as well as just a place to sit. We got our big shovels and decided to hollow out under the ramp pier thing enough to where we could crawl under and not be seen. It didn't take us long, since the high tide over the years had taken out a good 3 feet of sand underneath, and our adrenaline was rushing mad fast. We took our shovels inside and crawled under. The man was still yet to be seen. I assume it took us all of 8 minutes to climb under the pier. Our heads were partially visible above the sand horizon, and we started freaking out thinking he'd be able to spot us if he looked hard enough. There were 2 boogie boards lying about 50 yards away that looked like kids had abandoned on the beach. We grabbed them and propped them up against the ramp, covering our crawl space on the top of our heads from sight. Charlie curled up in a ball and cried while running scenarios by me that we were definitely going to get taken. I tried to calm him down and say everything was going to be okay, our parents would be back soon, but I definitely felt like crying myself. The whole thing felt so weird. I feel that since we both had such a bad feeling about the situation, especially at a young age, this was a man with sinister intentions. Charles and I peeked out of the small slits where the boogie boards curved and eventually saw the man walking back. He didn't have anyone with him, which we definitely thought he would since he said he was bringing back a friend. He saw we were gone, turned around several times, checking to see if we were in the ocean or up by the dunes. Once he realized, and thankfully didn't notice us there, he got extremely angry, noticeably angry. He started huffing and puffing, stomping around. Then he looked at our sandcastles and kicked all of them down. We built a ton over the course of the day and basically had a long wall of them, and he kicked every single mound down and stormed away. We stayed under the ramp pier thing for 45 more minutes until our family finally got back. We were way too scared to get out, especially after seeing his irrational reaction. We cried and told our family what happened, and they didn't believe us. We still talk about it sometimes at family gatherings or holidays. Both of us still remember it like it was yesterday. Seriously, I'm so glad we were aware kids who thought quickly. So, creepy-ass beach man who kicked down our sandcastles, let's not meet.
Hi, I've been lurking on here all day, as this kind of stuff is my guilty pleasure. I checked all sorts of creepy, disturbing, or just off people, and reading other users' stories is really fun and makes me glad I'm not alone. This is my first time posting, so I'm sorry if it's long. Alright. When I was about 10, my mother split up with her long-term boyfriend, and we moved into a cramped and dirty fourplex in a neighborhood that seemed very nice, but ended up being worse than anywhere I've ever lived. For example, my mum's windshield was smashed, a cracked-out man with a pipe watched us through our windows, police sirens every single night, etc. We lived right across from an elementary school, and there were 2 playgrounds, one south of the school, which was the closest one to us, and one on the north. It was common for neighborhood kids to play there, but on the day in question, it was deserted. Only my friend and I were there. My friend, who was also my upstairs neighbor, Anna, and I were too cramped up in our tiny apartment and decided to play at the south playground. Maybe 20 minutes into goofing around, a car pulls up with a woman inside. We disregarded her because nothing was off. That is, until she begins yelling into her phone. Man, she sounded angry. We were just too far away to hear her exact words, but close enough to see how furious she was, and that she was staring intently at us. Anna and I were getting uncomfortable, but she stopped yelling after a while and we just went back to playing. Anna looked back at the woman after a while and nudged me to look over too. The woman was taking photos of us, full flash and everything. Deeply unsettled, we decided to move to the north playground to get away from her. On the other side of the playground, we picked up our game, a little less enthusiastically though. We were already considering going home when her car pulls up to the side of the park and creepy lady starts talking on the phone again, but this time we were just within earshot. I can't totally remember everything, because this was 2 years ago, but she was listing off the address and talking about the cute girls and the 2 girls, the 2 blondies. Well, it was obvious she was referencing us, because not only did we fit all the things she was describing, she was staring at us so intensely I swear I could feel it. That's when she started getting out of her car, still looking at us. Anna and I hightailed it across the playground as I hear the car start up again. We're almost at the gates of the park, just a road and some stairs between us and safety. That's when the car pulls up to us and I can see her getting ready to get out. That's when Anna's mom starts shouting at us from the upstairs walkway, which spooked the lady in the car and she sped off. Turns out Anna's mom was outside on the deck and watched this happen, and was coming to get us when she saw us bolt home. I'm so glad she was there, because if Anna's mom wasn't there, I'm sure the lady would have snatched us right there. I still think back to this once in a while and it creeps me out that some lady has photos of me and Anna saved somewhere. I also bring this story up when people say to their kids you can trust women more over men, because while many creeps are men, this experience and many of my friends' stories proves that ladies are just as dangerous. Strangers are strangers. Don't just tell your kids about bad men.
Hey there. I posted a story yesterday, and in it I referenced another creepy instance, but that story was already really long, so I've decided to make a separate post for it. Like I said yesterday, when I was 10-ish, my mother and her long-term boyfriend split up, so we moved into a crackerbox fourplex and we lived on the bottom floor. The neighborhood seemed okay, but as we learned later, it was a little unsavory. On the day in question, my mother had the day off from work, which I was so glad about now. I went about my usual 10-year-old business in my room, coming out for chores and snacks. At one point around 3 p.m., I hear my mother gasp, which was odd. I was concerned our cat had eaten something poisonous, because he would eat anything, so I went out to investigate. When she heard my back door open, she yelled at me to lock all the bedroom windows and the back door, and then lock myself in the bathroom. I did just that, and was super scared. My mom asked to be let in, and I opened it and locked it behind her. She began calling the cops, and I was completely terrified about what she was telling the operator. While I was in my room, my mother had been washing dishes in the kitchen, which was connected to the living room. She saw movement out of the corner of her eye, and when she turned to look, she saw a man in our living room window. That's creepy enough, but he was also gripping a fucking pipe. He was just staring into our living room. At this point, I came out of my room because she had let out an involuntary gasp. My mom snapped back to earth and started yelling at me. At this point, Pipe Man hears her yelling and realizes there's someone home. He smiled and began walking around toward the back of the fourplex. My mom got the phone and dialed while following him, He looked through all of our windows on the way. He got to the back alley and began knocking at the door. When no one answered, he started jiggling the knob. We used to never lock it, but thankfully my mom reminded me to when this started. My mom ran into the bathroom when the jiggling started and relayed the info to the operator. After who knows how long, Pipe Man gave up and just left. No cops showed up to our house even though we called for them. My mother called the station itself, and the cops laughed. "Oh, you mean Charlie? No worry, he's harmless. We know him well. He goes around and stares in shop windows. It's fine, really. He does crack, but he's not dangerous. Have a good night, ma'am." And then he hung up on us. We were absolutely shocked. Apparently, some drug addict trying to break into our house while in possession of a weapon is harmless. He never came back, and I haven't seen any stories about Charlie in the news. Hopefully, he didn't do anything like that ever again, and he got sober. Although I have a feeling that didn't happen.
Okay, so this fucking thing happened to me yesterday. I can't fucking believe this. This freaked me the fuck out and I couldn't sleep today at all. Yesterday, on the 28th, it was my birthday. I plan to celebrate it with my closest friends, since it's the middle of the summer and most of my friends are somewhere on vacation, etc. I went with my closest friends to a bar, full of tourists, since it's at the center or downtown parts of the city. Now, a couple of hours ago, before I went to celebrate my birthday with my friends, I won a lottery or prize thing on Facebook for 2 free tickets to a movie. I'm a big movie buff, and so is my older sister, and we wanted to see the newest Ghostbusters movie at the cinema that's close to the bar I went to later. The movie had a showing at 10:30 p.m, which was pretty late, but it wasn't a new thing since I've been to midnight screenings for a couple of movies before. After my mini birthday party with my friends, I called my sis to see where she is, and she told me she was close. I was waiting with the free tickets in front of the cinema. I noticed 2 men, about 25 or 27 years old. I'm not too sure. They were looking at me and speaking in a language I couldn't recognize. I think it was probably something along Dutch or Swedish or Flemish, kind of like that. Though to be honest, I didn't hear them clearly because they spoke kind of quiet. You know the feeling when someone is talking about you, but you can't understand them because it's in a different language? Yeah, I got that feeling. My sis and a friend of hers, which I've only met once, came with her. She brought her ticket and I gave the other free one to my sister. The movie was about to start, so we sat down, and those foreign men sat right behind us. There were 10 to 15 people with us, and the screening room is pretty fucking huge, so it caught me off guard. Both men sat right behind my sister and her friend. I checked my phone, and in the corner of my eye I saw both of the men talking while looking at my sister and her friend. Both of those men did a selfie together. The weird thing was that they placed the phone a couple of centimeters near my sister's head when they took it. It was weird at first, but then weirder stuff started happening. I didn't tell my sister because I didn't want her to freak out or anything. During the first 20 minutes of the movie, my sister's friend told my sister that she wasn't feeling very well and she needed to get up early in the morning. My sister was weirded out because why the hell did she go to this late screening in the first place? It was one of the weirdest things I experienced that night, and above all, it was my birthday. I saw one of the men get up and sit in front of me for 5 seconds, and then get up again and sit back. I was like, what the hell was that? As the movie was ramping up with the big action set piece at the end, I got an uneasy feeling and gripped my seat really hard. My sis noticed something was off about me. The movie finally ended and all the lights were turned up. We were told there's a post-credit scene at the end if anyone wished to stay. All the other people left except me and my sis and the 2 men sitting behind us. I told my sis to wait to the end of the credits while giving her worried looks about the 2 men behind us. She got the gist that I was feeling uneasy. The post-credit scene ended. I got up with my sis and I saw a small phone turned on facing us at the front row, probably recording us. Now, I tried not to freak out, but inside I was scared to death. I told my sister that I was sleepy and that my head hurt from the 3D. The way I told that implied that the both of us needed to hurry the fuck up and get out of there. We were walking at kind of fast but not running pace to attract the attention of the two guys back there. Now, I'm not a big buff guy. I'm pretty wimpy, skinny, and I look like a dweeb, period. Those two guys didn't look intimidating at all, but I bet they could kick my ass easily. I was going faster and faster with my sister, and we tried to get home as soon as we could. Since there were no buses and I didn't see any taxis that were available, I noticed that those two men were following us, their eyes gazing at us with blank expressions. I told my sister not to freak out. There are two guys following us. She went pale in a split second, like she saw a ghost. As we were walking, I thought to myself that we were never going to get home alive, since it was still pretty far. There were no people in sight. It was like a ghost town, barely any cars driving by. I just remembered that one of my close friends lived pretty close to the location where we are. I called her and told her that I needed help. My friend, who was very paranoid about a lot of things, told us that she would wait for us outside with a boyfriend who goes to the gym regularly and is a boxer. I told her that I don't have enough battery to call the cops, and that my sister forgot to bring her phone, out of all the fucking days. She told us to hurry up. We were close to where my friend's apartment building was, and I saw one of the men reaching for something in his hand pocket. I grabbed my sister's hand, and we started walking even faster. I saw my friend waiting with her boyfriend, and they were heading towards us. Both of the men turned around and went the opposite way. I went to her apartment, and the cops came late. I saw the two men again standing in front of my friend's building taking pictures. My friend's boyfriend told me to go outside to confront them. I grabbed a baseball bat since I can't fight for shit, and we go outside to confront them. My friend's boyfriend shouts at them like, "Yo!" in my native language, and they obviously didn't understand him, so they start speaking in English that they don't understand. And while I know English, while my friend's boyfriend didn't know that well, I asked them what the fuck was going on and why they were following us. They started to evade the questions like nothing's wrong, and they started walking the other way. My friend's boyfriend took a picture of them. And I told them that I still know what they look like and will report them to the police. They didn't respond. I was relieved, but I was still shaking. The police came after 20 fucking minutes. We showed them the pictures of the man, and they said they would investigate and they will notify me further. I stayed with my sister at my friend's apartment till 5 a.m. just before the sun came up. Then I went home afterwards. I just woke up an hour ago, and I wanted to share this experience that I've had.
This happened around 10 years ago. I believe I was 11 or 12. I still remember this like it was yesterday. Our house was kinda isolated. I mean, there were houses nearby and whatnot, but it was a bit further down the road. When I was younger, my family was in a bad financial crisis, and we didn't have any fence or anything like that, and we sort of had a bush fence with a broken small door to the porch before the door to our house. One night, I was playing some video games and I was alone with a friend of mine. My sis and my parents were out at the time. My friend was a girl who was 3 years older than me, so she would have been 15. My family and hers were close friends for a long time, and she was kind of like a big sister to me. You could say she was babysitting me, but not really. Anyway, she went to get some water and she comes back running towards my room and tells me to turn off my gaming console. I asked her why she was so scared, and she turns off my PlayStation 2 and my light. She tells me to stay close to her. I start to freak out, and she tells me that she sees two older men outside my house with a camera, apparently filming. My friend and I tiptoe around the house for a knife in the kitchen, and it's dark, and there's no lights anywhere in our house, and I see one of the men trying to open our door by fidgeting the door handle. My friend starts to freak out, and she sees one of the men trying to lockpick the door. The other guy is nowhere to be seen. Now, my dad had a gun given by a close friend of his since his friend works for the police. My dad had never used a gun before and never used the one he was given by his friend. Well, my friend knew that my family had a gun and asked me where it was. I told her, "It's in my parents' bedroom, at the top of a wardrobe." We then both went to my parents' bedroom. My friend got the gun and loaded it partially with 2 or 3 bullets. Out of nowhere, we hear one of the windows breaking. We could hear the other guy very clearly. It was kind of muffled though, since he did appear to be wearing a mask, and he was speaking to the first one who was picking the door. He told him, "Get away from the door. I found a way inside. Kill the kid and get the girl." At that point, I sort of freezed and almost blacked out a bit. I couldn't think straight. My friend started running with my dad's gun towards them and screamed her lungs off in Serbian. "If any of you motherfuckers hurt Igor or me, I will fucking shoot your dicks off." The man bolted just before entering the window, and my friend unlocks the door and began running towards them till she ended up on the street where my house was, and she shot a warning shot into the air. I remember the shot being so loud, since where I lived was usually a quiet place. She comes back inside the house, calls the police, my family and hers, and we tell the story to everyone. My mother cried so much that night. The police told us there were some breaking and entering incidents near where I live, and some of the families were hurt, but luckily no one had died. It seemed these guys were amateurs. Many days passed, and it seems the police found one of them, but they never did find the other one. Thankfully, I've never had a similar experience to that ever again.
I just remembered this encounter back when I started 2nd grade. To give you a better idea of why this was weird, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. It was a big deal back in 2002 in my school, so I got into it. It's kind of like a board game, but it's very complex. Each character you uses has its own sheet and whatnot, so there were some precise rules to follow to get the most enjoyment out of the game. Now, as I mentioned, this happened when I started my 2nd grade. A boy transferred from one of the classes by the name of Bogdan. He was huge but chubby, wide-eyed, almost intimidating, but also very dweeby-looking boy. He's very weird to describe, I guess. Apparently he was autistic, and some kids used to make fun of him, which was horrible. Now, my class was one of the more disciplined ones at my school. We kind of accepted Bogdan quickly, and we used to hang out with him a lot, even if he did act weird. As a kid, I never fully grasped the concept of autism, so I found him sometimes annoying. Now I like to play a game by the name of Baldur's Gate 2, which was a Dungeons and Dragons video game. Everybody used to talk about it at my school. It came out in 2000, but since my country used to get games much later back then, we were talking about it in 2002. Now, Bogdan came from a rich family. His father was a popular lawyer, while his mum was involved in politics. So his parents were never really home all that much. Once my English teacher paired me up with Bogdan for a project to make a short fictional storyline. Now, I was a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, and so was he, so we decided to create a high fantasy storyline, even though we ripped 90% of the Baldur's Gate story with our own bizarre childlike imagination. Once I was invited to his house to finalize the project and present it to our teacher. So I went over there, and this is where some bizarre stuff happened. On the outside, the house was huge and beautiful, with 2 modern cars. I went inside, and I saw that the house is kinda messy, and a lot of mirrors and vases are broken, or it looks like they're in places that you normally wouldn't see a vase, like inside a bathroom or something. That, even as a kid, caught me pretty off guard. I saw the TV they had on the opposite side, facing the wall. It was pretty weird. I asked Bogdan what was going on, and he acts like nothing's wrong, and he keeps repeating something, word by word. Then, as we're both writing the end of our project, he starts quoting some of the lines of the characters from Baldur's Gate video game. The one he quotes the most is where your main character, depending on your gender, race and voice, moves to a different location and says in a Cockney-like accent, "Alright, what's this then?" He insists on me putting that line there for unknown reasons. I tell him it wouldn't make sense to put it there, and he repeats that fucking line again. I told him that I would finish the project back at my home because he annoyed the hell out of me. So I left, and he acted normally about me leaving like nothing's wrong. I present my project the next day with Bogdan, and he, out of nowhere, starts verbally abusing me about changing the storyline, even though I didn't change anything, and that what we wrote in was also approved by him. He starts calling me vile names for a kid that at the time I wasn't supposed to say. The teacher gets angry and we get an F. Now, I was a bookwormy type of kid, and this was the very first time I got an F since it was mostly A's and B's during first grade. I get angry and I push Bogdan violently to the floor and he starts crying. The teacher flips out and tells me that I will have to stay in detention after class. They call my mum and dad. My mum comes and scolds me for pushing Bogdan. She understood why I did that, but I shouldn't have done it in the first place. The next day, his father calls at my house and apologizes on the behalf of his son and tells him that me and Bogdan should make up first thing in the morning. The next morning, his dad and my mum meet face to face for the first time, and we all say sorry to each other. But I noticed that Bogdan said sorry in a very menacing way, almost like he planned to do something. I told my mum about it, and she told me I was being paranoid, that I should let go. A couple of days pass and me and Bogdan don't exchange a single word. Until he tells me something cryptically from the Baldur's Gate game, almost like a reference or something. He tells me, "Make way, villainy! Hero coming through!" Which one of the characters by the name of Minsk tells in the game. It's like an iconic line, I think. I thought he was just being Bogdan, till one day he didn't show up at school. I come home from school and I find one of my windows slightly broken and the doorknob of my front door house on the floor. Now, I was really bad financially with my family at that point, and we had this old-ass door that you didn't need a lot to get through. And for the past couple of weeks, we found that the doorknob was kinda not working at all. Also, I lived in a barrack like a house, not a proper one, very old and cheap. I found a couple of my Dungeons & Dragons board games missing, and a couple of mirrors broken in my house. For some reason, the Mayo was missing from the fridge. I instantly called my parents, and they both came quickly and called the police. The police came, asked my parents and me a couple of questions, and my sis who came late that day. They told us that they would find out what they can ASAP and would inform us. But I had a feeling that it was Bogdan. The board game's missing and the mirrors, it was obvious. His father was contacted by the police, and they informed him that his son broke and entered into my house. His father and his mother were shocked to find out, and this was reported on the news, since both of his parents were more or less famous people in my country. After that, both of his parents returned everything their son stole, and after a couple of weeks, Bogdan never returned to class and probably switched schools. Many years later, when I started high school back in 2009, I found out that both of his parents divorced and his father moved to another country.
I'm a 32-year-old female, and I live with my mother in a very rural area. My house is surrounded on all sides by miles of thick forest, with our driveway being the only open area leading out to the main road. Our closest neighbors on both sides are family members, and you can't see our house from the road, so I've never really felt the need to keep the doors closed, or even get fully dressed before walking outside. No pants runs out to the storage shed are common, and I usually think nothing of leaving both the front and back doors open. During the day, it just feels very safe. This has changed recently. It gets really hot in my part of the country. Over 100 degrees Fahrenheit isn't uncommon in the summer. We recently got a pool in the backyard. Unfortunately, I've been taking a medicine which causes my skin to blister if I get into direct sunlight, and the pool sits right where the sun hits it from sunrise until about 3 hours before sunset. That was my time to swim. For the first couple days, I didn't feel anything but bliss as I swam, and I would be in there until well after dark. About 3 days in, I started feeling a little nervous about staying in the pool after my mother got out, or about going in without her. She usually went in with me because I'd been sick and she was afraid, with all the medication I was taking, that I might pass out and drown. There was no logical reason why I felt uneasy. It was my own backyard and no one can see me behind the house. Not to mention, I have 2 yappy dogs who bark when they so much as think there might be a stranger around. The last time I felt so unnerved, I'd been walking in the woods behind my house and realized I was being stalked by a mountain lion. It was my danger sense telling me something wasn't right, but I kept rationalizing it away. A week goes by and I stop staying out after dark. By the time the sun goes down, I'm always inside. So here's when it finally dawned on me that a person's danger sense is called that for a reason. It had only been about 20 minutes since my mother got out, and I had done a couple laps back and forth, but was tiring kind of early. So I stopped swimming and just kind of bobbed in the water with my head tilted back, looking at the fluffy white clouds and the clear blue sky. It was really peaceful and relaxing. Had I been floating with my ears underwater, I probably wouldn't have heard it. A soft crackling sound, like dry leaves being crunched underfoot. I shot upright and looked around, but saw nothing. I figured it was the dogs, so I swam to the edge of the pool where I thought it came from, pulled myself up and looked over the edge. With a smile on my face and the dogs' names on my lips, there was nothing there. Confused, I swam around the entire pool, looking over the edge for the dogs. Nothing. I'd mostly convinced myself it was a squirrel and was relaxing back into the water when I heard it again. Soft crunching of leaves, followed by the snap of a twig. It was coming from the tree line. Again, I called for the dogs, since they love running in the woods. Complete silence. I ducked back into the water, beneath the edge of the pool, and waited. Less than a minute later, I heard a snap, 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 very clearly from the trees directly across from me. I poked my head up and stared intently in that direction. The sound stopped. I continued staring. Unfortunately, I'm nearsighted and obviously didn't bring my glasses into the pool. All I could see was a blurry green and brown from the trees. I ducked back down and did a lap, then paused next to the ladder. Snap, snap. Snap, snap. This is the point at which I noped out of there as fast as my waterlogged body could go. Up the ladder, grabbed the towels and shoes, and into the house. I told my mother what I'd heard, but much like me, she assumed it was the dogs because they were outside at the time. I told her it couldn't be. 2 young Jack Russell Terriers couldn't make soft and slow walking sounds if their lives depended on it. And they definitely would have come running when I called them. My thought was that it was a mountain lion prowling about, and that I shouldn't go back out for the rest of the day to give it time to clear off. I hopped in the shower to wash off the chlorine and had pretty much put it out of my mind when I realized something terrifying. The footsteps were actually familiar, but I didn't place where I'd heard them until that moment. They weren't like the steps of a 4-legged animal. They were more like something I'd make when I used to go hiking back there. Those were human footsteps. I finished my shower as calmly as possible and then told my mother my deduction, but she still didn't believe me. Later, my cousin brought my dogs home. Turns out, they'd been playing with his dogs in the yard for most of the day. Definitely not in the woods. If this were the end of it, I'd probably not have posted here. 2 days later, we had some terrible storms roll through. Little rain, but wind that took down trees and thunder that shook the house. From the first boom, I was wide awake, laying in bed and hoping it would be over soon. After about half an hour, the power went out. Without electricity and all the background noise that no one ever thinks about, it was eerily silent, except for the constant loud rumbles and booms of thunder. Finally, not able to go back to sleep, I got up to find a lantern and visit the bathroom. I took one step out of my room and froze. The rumbling I'd heard wasn't just thunder. Someone was standing on the back stairs and pulling at the back door. The door may look like a standard wooden exterior door, but it's actually steel. The rumbling was the metal door rattling in its metal frame, sounding much like the rumbles of the thunder. The layout of the house is basically my bedroom on the very end, the bathroom just next to my bedroom, then the back door in the hall leading to the kitchen. I was literally feet away from whoever desperately wanted in my house. I stood frozen in place, my body gone cold and shaking. After a few more minutes of rattling, it stopped and I heard what sounded like angry footsteps go down the stairs and head not towards the road, but into the woods. I went back to bed and hid under the covers like a scared little kid until morning. You might ask, why didn't you wake your mother? Why didn't the dogs bark? Why didn't you call the cops? Well, the power was out and I knew the cell phone wasn't charged, so calling the cops was out. My mother couldn't have done anything and has a bad track record with not listening to me about dangerous situations, so frankly, I didn't trust her not to cause an even worse situation by going outside to prove to me that no one was there. As for the dogs, they were scared of nothing except thunder. They were hiding under the couch where they would always go when it's raining. This isn't the end. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing else happened. I didn't go back into the pool and I made sure the doors were locked at night, but everything generally went back to normal. One day, I had just gotten up and headed for a shower. Both front and back doors were open, but my mother was sitting in the living room with both dogs. I didn't feel the least bit unsafe taking a shower with the bathroom door closed but unlocked. About halfway through the shower, I heard a loud thump from inside the room. My first thought was that the towels had fallen off the counter. I pulled back the curtain to check, but they were right where I'd put them. Then, I noticed that the bathroom door was cracked open. Someone had opened the door, only to hit the trash can I'd placed over the floor vent in front of the door, so it wouldn't blow on me in the shower. I assumed it was my mother and went back to my shower. If she really needed in, she'd just have pushed the can out of the way. When I got out, I headed to the living room to find neither mother nor dogs anywhere in sight. Alright. Maybe she'd opened the door to tell me she was going somewhere and I just hadn't heard her. About that time, she walked in with the dogs and mail in hand. I asked what she'd wanted and she told me she'd left just after I got into the shower. She'd walked down to the mailbox and the dogs had followed her. I really didn't want to scare her or to be disbelieved again, so I told her I thought I'd heard her say something and left it at that. It was definitely not her that opened the door. I figure, whoever it was, they were trying to be sneaky and thought I'd been alerted to an intruder when they caused the noise, so they fled. That was 3 days ago. I still haven't called the police because I have absolutely no proof. No one's experienced anything but me, and even though I'm most certainly not an overdramatic attention-seeking liar, I've been painted as one in the past due to certain mental and anxiety issues. Even if I contacted the police, I'm sure I'd just get the "there's nothing we can do" treatment. And as for the footsteps in the wood, I've pretty much decided that this person does not know my eyesight is as bad as it is. The footsteps stopped when I stared in their direction because they thought I had seen them. When I ducked back down, they decided I hadn't and probably thought I was floating with my ears submerged and couldn't hear clearly.
Hello, long-time lurker and first-time poster here. Please be gentle about any formatting errors. This is a story that happened a few years before I was born, but my mum has told it to me countless times, and the older I get, the scarier it is to me. Obviously, I've changed names to keep everyone's identity safe, but I want to note that my brother is about 6 at the time of this story, and my sister is about 9. In the late 80s, early 90s, my family moved to Ohio for my dad's work. He worked long days usually, and wouldn't get home until late in the evenings. My mum, however, worked near where we lived, but didn't usually get off work until an hour or two after my brother and my sister got home from school on the bus. Luckily, we had a nice next-door neighbor whose son rode the bus with them, and he would meet them and walk them home to make sure they made it inside every day. I'm still very thankful for him, even though I don't remember him much. On this day, after the neighbor had dropped him off at the house, Taylor decided to go outside and play in the driveway. He was throwing a ball around like 6-year-olds do, when a beat-up white car rode by a little too slowly. We lived on a small street that ended in a cul-de-sac, and our house sat directly behind a middle school. From what I can remember, it was a very nice neighborhood. Even at 6, my brother knew this car was out of place here. He said he scooted back up the driveway towards the house when the car pulled around again, eventually slowing to a stop right in front of him. The guy, who can only be described as your typical 1980s kidnapper/creeper, he had greasy hair, dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, rolled down his window and offered what every 1980s kidnapper offered every kid who was kidnapped in the 1980s: candy. Taylor, fortunately remembering my mother's years of strangers are lying about the candy training, shook his head and fumbled backwards toward the house, not taking his eyes off the guy. Realizing candy didn't work, he tried puppies next, assuring my brother that his puppy was lost and he needed him to help find it. This apparently flipped the final switch for Taylor, who then screamed at the top of his lungs and ran back into the house to get Dot. The scream scared the guy shitless. He peeled out so fast he left tire marks on the road, and after they were sure the coast was clear, Taylor and Dot booked it out the back door over the neighbor's house, who called my mum and then the police. My brother gave a good description of the guy in the car, despite being so young and so shaken by the events, and for a few days we didn't hear anything. From then on, my brother and sister waited at my neighbor's house after school every day. There weren't any updates on the guy. Then, they found a body a few miles from our house in a ditch. It was the body of a 5-year-old boy, similar in size and appearance to Taylor. He'd been beaten severely, backed over with a car, and then eventually disposed of in the ditch they found him in, long dead. It didn't take long for the police to find his mother, who quickly admitted to beating him to death when he'd misbehaved. Not entirely sure, but I imagine there were drugs or alcohol involved. I don't know how anyone could beat a child to death if they were sober. Apparently, after she'd realized what she'd done, she'd gone to her boyfriend in a panic for help with the situation. Guess who? According to her, he'd suggested backing over the body with the car so that they could take him to the hospital and tried to convince them it was all an accident. When that didn't work, they came up with a second plan: to abduct another child of a similar age, wait a few days, and then report their son missing. They'd hoped to create the illusion of a kidnapper with a taste, and in doing so, they could act surprised when the body was found. They wanted to distract everyone from their son's disappearance. I don't think they had a plan for what they were going to do once they'd actually taken the second child, which makes it somehow even scarier. Had they gotten my brother, of course, returning him afterwards would be out the question. I can't help but imagine that he'd wind up in another ditch somewhere else. I don't know what happened to them after that, but I'm hoping, and kind of assuming, they're locked up for the most, if not for the rest of their lives. I grew up hearing this story, which is probably part of the reason I'm so interested in L&M. And I'm thankful every day my mum instilled such a solid sense of stranger danger in us, because without it, I'd most likely not have the awesome older brother that I do.
Hey, I'm a 13-year-old female. This happened when I was 9 years old, not that long ago, so I remember a lot. It may not be as scary as some of the other stories, but it scared me due to the fact that this wasn't my first encounter with a pedophile, and I'm left mentally scarred from my earlier childhood when I was actually sexually assaulted. Anyway, back to the story. My grandpa at the time had a girlfriend who was emotionally abusive towards him, who he only broke up with recently. Her name was Mindy. She also brought her 23-year-old daughter named Ava. My grandpa is a man who loves nature. He likes to go fishing, camping, and watches those Nature Channel documentaries. He decided to take me and his girlfriend and her daughter out upstate to a campsite near a lake where we could go on the water on a raft to catch fish. The place was a big campground, and he had some small shops and some domestic animals. It also had a playground, and that's where the scary part takes place, but we'll get to that in a minute. We got there and set up camp. We were having fun until the third day. My grandpa and Mindy got into a fight, and he decided to go pick me up some food for lunch and told Ava to watch me till I got back, since I didn't want to drive a half hour to the McDonald's and then a half hour back. Ava agreed, and off he went. Mindy got wasted at this point, and Ava, knowing that Mindy would try to pull some crap, she took me to the playground. We had fun for about 45 minutes and decided to head back. Mindy had passed out when we got back, so we decided to relax. I had to go to the bathroom, so I told that I was going, and I wanted to go to the playground to see if the kids I was playing with a few minutes before were still there. Mindy started to wake up, and Ava told me that it was fine and told me that she was going to take care of Mindy. I went off to the bathroom and saw the kids had left, which I could tell because the bathroom was right next to the playground. All I saw was a man on a bench, staring at nothing until he snapped back to his senses and noticed me. I felt a sense of uneasiness and went into the outhouses that the place had. Due to my past experiences with creepers in my earlier childhood, I knew he wasn't a nice guy. I got out of the bathroom and looked at the playground and noticed that the guy was gone. I had a feeling that he was watching me, but I still wanted to go to the swings now that the kids were gone. I located a rock to use as a weapon if he tried anything. I placed the rock under me on the swing and started swinging for about 5 minutes. I was about to leave when I noticed the man walk out from behind the bathroom. I remember a small opening where the roof met at a point, but the wall wasn't connected where someone could look through. And that's where he was standing. I immediately realized that's probably what he was doing, and that's why I didn't see him. He quickly walked over to me, and I couldn't run away because he was coming from the direction of the opening of the playground, and behind me was a tall fence that led to the woods. I got off the swing and went to pick up my rock, but the man was right next to me at that point, and I felt he would react badly to me threatening him with a rock, and there wouldn't be enough time for me to pick up the rock and hit him before he would try to grab me. At that moment, he leaned forward and asked me a question. Hey there, do you happen to be French-Canadian? This question confused me, and I told him yes. He then said in a low voice with a smile, I like French-Canadian girls. I didn't know what to do, but then a goat that belonged to the campground walked along the side of the path. This was the time of day they let the 2 goats walk around, and the playground was near the farm area. I saw it and gave the man a surprised look, and the man turned around to look at it. You like goats? I picked up the rock, and he looked at me with a curious look and smiled. I inched my way past him and ran back to my tent. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want my grandpa to find out and to go back to prison. He'd gone to prison before for unrelated reasons, and I knew if he found the guy, he would have killed him. We left 3 days later, and I never saw him again. So, creepy guy with a weird fetish for French-Canadian little girls. Let's not ever meet again.
So, this happened in 2000, when I was like 13 or 14, but my aunt only told me the full story recently, and it's absolutely terrifying. When I was a teenager, my favorite aunt used to pick me up after school, babysit her 3 boys, then ages 7, 3, and 2, while she went to work part-time. She'd recently separated from her husband, so I was helping out pretty much every day at that point. We had a routine. We'd eat dinner and play in the yard until the sun went down. But one day, she told me not to take the boys out at all. She then launched into this whole safety lecture: lock the door, don't answer if anybody knocks, keep the shades closed, etc. And I thought it was weird. Fast forward about a week, and I come over one day to a security company installing an alarm system in the house. My aunt tells me to come talk in the kitchen. She tells me that for weeks she's been finding cigarette butts and food wrappers in the bushes, which is weird because she's very OCD and never leaves a mess. And that she heard a cough in the bushes that morning, so she went outside to investigate. She found a guy squatting there, face pressed against the window, and proceeded to lose her shit. He snarled at her and said, "Bitch, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking for that pretty babysitter of yours." Before running off. She called the police, but they didn't catch him and kept patrolling the neighborhood for a while after. Eventually, she calmed down and things returned to normal. We were allowed to play in the yard again after a few weeks, and I forgot all about it. Last weekend, the story came up at a family barbecue, and my aunt got really quiet and pale. She said there was more to the story, and since I'm 30 now, I should probably hear the rest. Turns out a guy matching the description she had given the cops was arrested about a week later for raping a teenage girl in an apartment complex 1 block from her house. It's terrifying to think that this piece of shit excuse for a human had been watching me for who knows how long, and what he was planning to do, and what he did to someone else.
So, to give some background, I live in a fairly busy city, but on a side of it that's fairly quiet and laid back. My neighborhood is one of the nicer ones, and all the gang activity / break-ins and bad stuff usually happens a few blocks away due to my house being tucked away at the end of a few major streets. I'm about 5'4", female, blonde, and fairly little. Part of my daily routine involves walking to my local convenience store for cigarettes and an energy drink, so about 6 months ago I woke up hungover and needed my daily rations. The store is about 6 blocks away, and I know all of the employees, so I have no problems drunkenly venturing there. As I was walking, a car turns off of a busy street that I was crossing, which isn't unusual, so I ignored its slow pace. I heard the driver, a very large black guy, trying to get my attention, so I paused, thinking he was one of my roommate's friends, but I didn't recognize him. Upon realizing I didn't know him, I simply turned up my music and kept walking the remaining 4 blocks. When I get to the store, I notice he's parked across the street, but I'm so focused on getting my energy drink that I think nothing of it. I go inside, talk to my friends behind the counter for about 10 minutes, and leave. As I'm walking home, I notice that he's still following me, and realize that he has been for over 30 minutes, counting waiting time while I was in the store, and stupidly stop walking. He tries to talk to me, and I tell him I'm uncomfortable and not interested. Well, he doesn't take no very well and proceeds to block the street I'm trying to cross with his vehicle. As I'm approaching the intersection, he starts to open his door, and I'm having none of that. I live in a conceal and carry state, and luckily my Glock 40, unloaded, was in my purse from the previous evening. After telling him several times to leave me alone and that I'm not interested, he opens his truck door and sees the barrel pointed directly at him. Never have I seen anyone get back into their vehicle that fast. Green SUV guy that I have no interest in. Let's not meet.